Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Again, coming to you from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I decided to take a couple of days, and I thought I was going to do a vacation. And then everybody decided I'm going to make headlines. The governor made headlines. Some guy named Josh McLaurin made headlines, senator from the 14th District in the state of Georgia, decided he's going to throw his hat in the ring for lieutenant governor. And so, okay, here we are. We're going to do a show while I'm on vacation. No big deal. It's just 45 minutes. Anyway, Senator Josh McLaurin joins us to elaborate on his goal of running for the lieutenant governor's office. Josh, thanks for joining me. I appreciate that.
Of course, Ron. Happy to join you wherever you are.
On vacation, yeah. Next time I'll pick a tropical destination and we'll all be happy, right?
Sure.
So you're running for lieutenant governor. My first question is, how much consultation did we have with the family on this? And was it a unanimous vote, or were there any concerns? One of the pets maybe, speaking ill of this thought process?
I slipped it through. I snuck it through by unanimous consent. So nobody forced a vote with an objection. So it just kind of happened, and everybody was like, "Wait a minute, what happened?"
Yeah,
so,
no filibustering then.
That's right. No, I mean look, lieutenant governor is a funny role to run for because it's not governor. It's got governor in the name. It's not governor.
Yeah, it's in there.
And some people, that's the main draw, right? It's like, ooh, waiting in line or whatever. I honestly, I can tell you, I just really like the art of politics at every level, just in terms of what it means to believe in something, and you don't know if it's possible, but you go, pound the pavement, talk to everybody, see if you can get the votes. And I made that unanimous consent joke. That's how we got a booting regulation passed this year, booting of cars in the Senate, was I put an amendment on a bill, and I had been whipping votes for years. When I say years, talking to Republicans, Democrats. But then the amendment got on the bill by unanimous consent. And if you had asked me beforehand if that would have happened, I would have been like, heck no, there would have been, some huge debate over it. But it just goes to show, with enough persuasion, with enough time and coalition building, you can get it done. So a lot of that has very little to do with formal power and like beating people at in votes and having the numbers. And it has a lot more to do with just relationships and learning how to frame the narrative and pursue the goal. So that's what I'm hoping that I can do with this seat. I have a girlfriend, but I have no kids.
But I mean, you did ask her, right? Or not necessarily ask, but hey, so I have political aspirations. I don't know if you know this. I'm a senator, and I'm thinking about doing this. What are your thoughts? I mean, you bounced it off.
I met my current girlfriend while I was in office, so it's not like she's not used to this sort of thing. But I certainly would not want for my community, my friends, my family to hate this idea, and certainly nobody has. I think people understand that I enjoy doing this, and look. Enjoy, or say words like fun, those are difficult words right now because the Trump administration is a nightmare. But I think the goal for all of us is if politics is going to be uplifting again, if it's going to be more than just stressful and depressing, we've got to find our joy where we can find it. And I find the joy in trying to do this work.
You have, by the way, I think made yourself a bit of a household name, at least in Georgia political circles, which is not easy. But you have made yourself a little bit of a household name on a couple of fronts. Working in the Senate chamber each day by bringing a little bit of, the reality from the new Trump regime to the Senate floor, I think was viral worthy, must-watch YouTubing on a day-to-day basis. Congratulations on that. And you also teamed up with a fellow Democrat from the House, Representative Arul Rahman, for occasional updates on the Democratic Party social media. And I think that's very important, by the way. I stress this a lot when, we were having discussions about there being a new party chair and the direction that the party should be taking. I thought the state party really sort of lacked in its social media game, and the strides that have been made even before Charlie Bailey was elected last weekend, I think were good. And I don't know what hand you had in that, or if you just volunteered or were voluntold to step up into those roles, but I think you guys have done a really good job at that.
Thank you for saying that. Some of it is, us talking to each other and thinking, what can we do to respond in the moment? Some of it's more organic. And like the Trump morning news thing I was doing, I think you're alluding to that sort of this like almost daily or every other day or every few days update about the craziness going on in Washington. I wanted to do that because I felt like it would be a lack or a lapse in my responsibility if I didn't do that. I felt like some of these issues are so crazy, like Doge dismantling the government or people getting disappeared, or you name it, there's 100 things to talk about. But I felt like my colleagues were not forced to pay as much attention to that as I thought they should be. And so people may not believe this. A lot of times people are cynical and think, oh, they're just speaking to the cameras. They're just trying to get their media hit or go viral. I genuinely wanted my colleagues to have to confront the reality of how bad the Trump administration was. And it just so happened that some of those clips, I think, spoke to people and made the rounds on the internet because we're all feeling that urgency right now.
Well, it's hard to go into a job like yours and think, oh, it's business as usual. No, there's nothing usual about the business lately. And everything that's happening at the federal level eventually will touch folks at the state, at the county, at the municipal, and at the personal level as well. I was just talking to my friend who I'm visiting, and he was talking about, having a disability situation that he's long, received like a small stipend for. And because he falls under the 30% threshold, may go away, and it's like $100, $150 or something like that. But that's going to impact the economy because he uses that money to pay his bills or go, buy goods and necessities and whatnot. And so I think it's important that while you're in that chamber working on what are supposedly state needs, you can't treat it like it's business as usual in such an unusual circumstance.
That's totally right. I mean, so something I've been thinking and talking a lot recently about is the polling data, the public opinion data out there about how Americans writ large are responding to Trump is so important. It is not just horse race politics where we are tracking who's likely to win in a future election. Those public opinion numbers matter now because they determine very practically what the Trump administration thinks it can get away with on a daily basis. And there are scholars of authoritarianism who write, if some kind of a regime has 60, 70, 80% support for what it's doing, then it will be much bolder in trying to curtail rights and advance its own agenda than a regime that has in the 30s or 40s. And so now that Trump is dropping into the early or low 40s and high 30s type approval numbers, that's really good news for democracy. It doesn't mean we're out of the woods, but it means that we have successfully framed the narrative enough to let the people know, hey, this is what's happening. It's bad. It's not normal. And so, again, going back to my race and what I think Democrats seem to be doing right now, sure, we've got all our issues. We've got all the issues we always talk about. Sensible gun legislation, restoring reproductive rights, expanding Medicaid. There's all kinds of stuff that we want to do if we're in charge. But the immediate threat, the house burning down moment that we're having is all hands on deck to defend our basic institutions, the rule of law. And, tariffs are a great example of how when you don't care about the democratic fundamentals or, you throw those out, then the economy suffers too. Everybody starts to actually pay a greater cost, quite literally in dollars, for the chaos that's happening.
So you're stepping up and running for a higher office, a statewide office versus a Senate district seat. And you're going to be faced with going to places that you may not have formerly felt fully comfortable being that Democratic candidate step into. Has that crossed your mind that? Well, let me just give you some backstory. I felt for the last 3 or 4 cycles that at the upper echelons of Democratic Party leadership in the state that they've been hesitant to leave the perimeter, to go to Rabun County, to go to Vidalia, Georgia, to go to Southwest Georgia, where you might only find 7 or 12 Democrats, and it may not look good on a photo, but those are 7 to 12 votes that you could be, culling and bringing back into the loop even, or maybe growing by 1 or 2, and they add up. What is your strategy for making sure that you touch all 159 counties so that you can be sworn in as lieutenant governor?
Well, I want to go everywhere. And there's no doubt in the next 18 months, I plan to go everywhere. I did launch in Savannah yesterday, Monday, and I wanted to make a point. I don't know that any statewide candidate not from Savannah has done that before, to go to Savannah and launch a statewide campaign as a Metro Atlanta candidate. The reason I did that, look, I talked about tariffs. We went to the port, obviously very topical to point at the ship as it's going by and say, this is what we're trying to protect. This is what's being affected by the chaos in Washington. But more than that, I wanted to make a statement that, look, I'm a Metro Atlanta candidate and I'm announcing my campaign. I'm not doing it in my district. I'm not doing it over a video and then sort of doing call time and fundraising. I'm going straight to a community that I know a little less well starting out than the one that I'm from. Right. And I think it's important that we communicate to communities all throughout the state, not just in the metro, that we care, that those communities matter, and that we are going to go there. And we can show, not tell. We can vote with our feet and prove it and go. And I think that gives confidence to communities that we are one statewide community and that we're not just crunching numbers when we try to get votes. We are actually caring about people wherever they might be.
We're with Senator Josh McLaurin, running from the Senate District 14 now for Lieutenant Governor on the 2026 ballot. Just launched his campaign earlier this week, and as he mentioned just a few minutes ago, it's an 18-month slog to the ballots for November in 2026. Lieutenant Governor will essentially be the one with the gavel in the Senate chamber, which I know you're familiar with, and you've seen Burt Jones wield that gavel for a while now, and I can't imagine you went to him and said, "Hey, any tips, any pointers on how to do this, or any inside information you want?" Because obviously you aren't from the same party, but there have to be some things that you did pick up from him along the way that can be useful. So, in an effort of bipartisanship, what do you think you learned from Burt as president of the Senate, so to speak, in that regards that you'll be able to take with you to put to use if you're so honored to win that seat?
Well, that's actually a really insightful question. I'll start out by saying that I think my style in that office would be very different from his.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly if I'm a member of the minority party, but the majority is Republican, they'll change the rules package. They'll approach the office differently than they have under Burt. That being said, one thing that Burt has done that I think has been effective is that he has not pushed too hard on his rhetoric in places where he would be better served by just kind of letting things go. So if there's a costly, political battle happening, he might stay out of it and let members of the majority fight it out themselves. And he is just kind of there for the fireworks, but he's just holding the gavel. But he's also inserted himself on the issues that he wanted to make his priorities. Now, I completely disagree with some of his major priorities that he, will immediately send press releases out about, or his team will right after the bill passes. But he has not always been heavy-handed. He has sort of only applied pressure on the 2 or 3 things that matter to him. And look, any politician will tell you, you don't want to spend all your capital in one place, and you don't want to try to exert more capital than you have. And so, in the interest of sort of the question you asked me, which is almost like the debate night question of say something nice about your opponent, but that's the best I can come up with. What I will say, though, is that I intend to be much more active than he has been in framing debates, because that will be the primary power of a Democratic lieutenant governor, is to shape the narrative and explain to voters why much of the Senate business that's coming out of that chamber is wacky and why it's going to hurt people. Just this session, the Senate passed a bill criminalizing school librarians and media technicians for quote unquote obscenity in school libraries. Literal criminal penalties, which 6 years ago, that was like a right-wing pipe dream. And now it's not only making it out of committee, it made it out of the Senate. Now, the House didn't pass it. But every year that right-wing surge is moving us closer to these policies that previously even the Republicans in office now would have thought unthinkable. And so people need to understand how crazy that is. I think the teachers and the media technicians understand. I've been to their conference before, years ago, when they were deathly afraid of this bill. But look, if one parent who is opposed to LGBTQ rights sees a book in a school library that, favorably depicts gay people kissing or married or who knows what, and then they go to the school and they say, hey, you might be guilty of a misdemeanor, I'm going to refer this to a prosecutor. Does the school really want to go through the rigmarole and the stress of having to stand their ground and defend possible criminal charges, or are they just going to pull the book? And so that's exactly the type of way that establishment Republicans, quote unquote moderates, that you would otherwise think of as quote moderates, are gaming the system right now to use extremist policies to threaten the outcomes that they want. So maybe they don't defund the entire University of Georgia over DEI, but if they pass a bill saying they're going to, then University of Georgia will comply in advance potentially and start, scrubbing programs, scrubbing job titles. So the whole goal here is, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to, look like they're passing extremist policies, but then they'll say, well, we're not actually extremists because none of this stuff will ever actually go into effect. We're just kind of, messing around. It's politics, but it has the effect of people being scared and curtailing their own rights to comply in advance.
More with State Senator Josh McLaurin running for Lieutenant Governor on the 2026 ballot when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn. You can call the show 404-919-2725 if you'd like to leave a message, maybe be on the air. This is the Ron Show. Thank you for listening on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. State Senator Josh McLaurin from the 14th District running for Lieutenant Governor joins me today to discuss those prospects. You mentioned being potentially a Lieutenant Governor. We could have a governor as well, who is a Democrat. We could have 2 public service commission seats flip blue this election cycle, this 2025 election cycle. And yet, because of baked-in gerrymandering, as you mentioned before, very likely you would still have a Senate majority for Republicans, the House majority as well. That's also going to change how you would tackle the role as lieutenant governor, wouldn't it, though? Because you literally have to use the bully pulpit way more than a Burt Jones from the majority party would.
So I don't know if you're going to be shocked to hear this, Ron, but politicians are soft. They have very soft and delicate egos, and I won't even say that I'm inherently different, because all of us care about optics. We care about what our image is, obviously, because we run for office, and we expect that people are going to analyze what they see of us in the public domain. So it matters so much to the Republican majority right now that they can go have their state of the state addresses and their procedural rituals, and their leaders come in and they all stand and clap and they all celebrate each other and pat each other on the back and say, Georgia's the number 1 state to do business for the 957th year in a row. I mean, they love doing that. And so I actually can't describe to you how much it matters for there to be a splinter in that narrative. If the highest officer or the second officer in state government is in the room openly disapproving of what's happening, it kind of kills their vibe, and it reduces their motivation to keep passing harmful policies, thinking that nobody cares, or that, look, it's just politics, nobody ultimately will be harmed by this. It drives a wedge in that narrative. So I think, again, going back to this whole idea that public opinion during these troubled times really does matter, and it really matters what kind of story Georgians are telling themselves about what's happening at the state and federal governments. Even in that environment where Democrats don't have the numerical votes necessary to have, quote, power, we can exert the type of influence necessary to wake up Georgians to what's really happening in their state government, wake Georgians up to what's happening with Trump, and start moving us in the right direction.
So your party just elected its new state party chair, Charlie Bailey. Do you sense that there will be a full slate of candidates running for every House and Senate seat in the state of Georgia to even give the party a chance to come close to a split or a majority in either or both chambers?
I'll say this, I think the energy is good. I think that more people are going to come out of the woodwork as we get closer and closer to 2026, because as we know, these tariffs have not had their full impact yet. We are only weeks away from supply chain effects really starting for the ripples to turn into waves. And so I think, it's really still early, notwithstanding that I have announced my statewide campaign this early. There will be a lot of candidates who come in later. Now, can I guarantee you that we are going to contest every single race, up and down the ballot everywhere? That's always the goal, because you want to put the best foot forward that you can. I don't know that I can guarantee that. I know that Charlie's going to work really hard on that. He's a friend. I think that he will be a great leader during this time. And I know that the senator endorsed him, and we're all going to consolidate, work as a team now. What I will say is I just think that if we, you don't like the reasons why we have this opportunity as a party in 2026, they're dire circumstances. But if it's going to happen, and if Trump is going to behave this erratically, then the party has to be ready. It is our duty to Georgians to be ready to present an alternative, and I'm confident we're going to do that.
My last question, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. After the America's Hitler statement, you're the guy that you knew J.D. Vance back in the day and swapped text messages, this, that, and the other. Have you guys spoken in any way, shape, form, or fashion since that moment, since that came to light? I mean, has he hit you up and said, hey, dude, not cool, you shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, any sort of interaction whatsoever?
No, not at all. I think that in his mind, he has won. He won the big prize. He got what he traded his soul for, right? Yeah. So why would he have to worry about me? If anything, he beat all the haters is probably how he thinks about it. So all I'm saying is that may be true. He may have won the day. But what has he won? I mean, everything that Trump touches dies, right? ETTD. That was an acronym from the last 10 years that people have enjoyed sharing, because it's like, look, at some point we expect the karmic consequences of people's actions to catch up with them. And obviously JDs have not caught up with him yet. But what I will say is I would much rather be a state legislator with principles who is not afraid of people holding my comments from 10 years ago up to the light than to be a vice president under these circumstances, with the ship crashing and with America devolving further and further into distrust and pain. what is he really presiding over? So I guess my point is, I can understand why he thinks that he's won and should move on, but I think we're only beginning to see the consequences of Republicans like JD selling everything that is precious for just a little bit of power.
Yeah, some of us are just kind of getting impatient for karma to come around, but that's another story for another day. Josh McLaurin running for lieutenant governor. Your website, your socials, where folks can get involved if they'd like to monetarily or volunteering to work for your campaign. Where do they go?
JoshForGeorgia.com. And I think we've got all the possible permutations of that domain. So try it out. However you spell it should be fine. But I would really be honored if anybody believes in this effort enough to get involved at this early stage and sort of make a statement that, we don't need a big primary on this one. We've got somebody who, this is my third year in the Senate. I know how the process works. 7th year in the legislature. I think I'm ideally positioned to take this gavel and give them hell. But listen, if I need to make my case, I'm always happy to, like you say, go everywhere in the state, meet people, and welcome everybody aboard.
And you've got my number as well. Don't hesitate to use it. Josh McLaurin, thanks for joining the Ron Show today. I appreciate it. Good luck.
Thank you, Ron. Enjoy your vacation.
Thanks, buddy.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
All right, so while we wait to find out if or if not Stacey Abrams decides to run again, making a third go for the gubernatorial seat in Georgia, got to take you through a little bit of a history here. In recent months, we have learned that Stacey Abrams was falsely cited by President Donald Trump for receiving billions of dollars in federal funding that she did not personally receive. For a reminder, here's what he said at the joint session of the House and Senate that he gave a speech to earlier this year.
$1.9 billion to recently created Decarbonization of Homes Committee, headed up, and we know she's involved. Just at the last moment, the money was passed over by a woman named Stacey Abrams. Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah, so PolitiFact, the Washington Post, all eviscerating that. In fact, I'll give you the quick bullet points from PolitiFact. Stacey Abrams, a two-time Democratic candidate for Georgia governor, was senior counsel for Rewiring America from March 2023 through 2024. Rewiring America was part of a 5-group coalition that was awarded a $2 billion Environmental Protection Agency grant to help make homes across the country more energy efficient. There's no evidence Abrams directly received any of the grant money or that she led the broader coalition that received the grant. That is the long story short of that. You're thinking, Ron, where are you going with this? This was covered ground a couple of months ago. Well, it'll be interesting to see now what happens here at the state level as I read to you from the Georgia Recorder and Ross Williams reporting that there is now an ethics complaint, a second ethics complaint actually, filed against this conservative lobbying group with influence here at Georgia's capital. Williams writing, an influential conservative lobbying group has allegedly failed to file the proper disclosures in connection with advertisements for Governor Brian Kemp and Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones in the 2022 election cycle, according to a complaint filed with the State Ethics Commission. Frontline Policy Action, an evangelical 501c4 organization that successfully lobbied during the 2025 legislative session for bills including the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and a ban on transgender women and girls playing on women's sports teams, is the target of this ethics complaint. It's submitted on April 30th by attorney Brian Sells, who I believe has been on this show before. He alleges that Frontline Policy Action violated multiple state laws in the run-up to the 2022 election in which Kemp won a rematch against Democrat Stacey Abrams. Now, I'm going to be curious to see what comes of this ethics complaint, because I'm going to remind you of something that happened not all that long ago. Reading from Politico, the New Georgia Project and its Action Fund did not disclose millions of dollars in expenditures that sought to boost Stacey Abrams in the 2018 gubernatorial race. Politico's Andrew Howard filing this story back on January 15th. A nonprofit founded by perennial candidate Stacey Abrams has settled a complaint with the Georgia Ethics Commission and will pay $300,000 to the state for illegally spending millions to bolster Abrams' gubernatorial bid in 2018. According to the consent order, which was made public on Wednesday, following the Ethics Commission's vote to approve it, the New Georgia Project and its fundraising arm, the New Georgia Project Action Fund, failed to disclose roughly $4.2 million in contributions and $3.2 million in expenditures that were used mostly to support Abrams during the 2018 primary and general election. That is, by the way, the general election that she ran against a fellow by the name of Brian Kemp, who was Secretary of State overseeing elections. That's right. The Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, in 2018, oversaw the election he was in while running for governor of the state of Georgia. But the new Georgia project had to pay a $300,000 fine for some paperwork misfiling, essentially. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of repercussions come from this complaint Brian Sells has filed against Frontline Policy Action, where, again, he alleges that they violated multiple state laws in the run-up to the 2022 election. One of them being failure to report advertising spending. Back to the Ross Williams article at the Georgia Recorder. According to the complaint, Frontline produced and distributed several advertisements in October and November 2022, including a 30-second video featuring a transgender swimmer winning a competition that appeared on Facebook and Instagram. Sellers says Frontline did not file required disclosure reports containing the expenditures for those advertisements on the 4 dates required by the state, and he says that amounts to 4 separate violations. Then there was failure to disclose contributions and expenditures. Williams writing, between the July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023, Frontline reported bringing in $246,831 in contributions and spending $237,311 on its IRS filings. But the complaint alleges Frontline did not report either its income or its expenditures to the State Ethics Commission, which Sells alleges amounts to 2 more violations of the law. And then there was failure to include required statements. Williams writing, under state law, anytime an independent committee like Frontline pays for a political advertisement, the ad needs to clearly state that it was funded by the committee. Sells found 3 advertisements he says does not contain that required statement, which he says equals 3 more violations. And then there's the coordinated campaign contributions. Williams writing, state law forbids anybody from making contributions to any candidate for statewide elected office above certain inflation-adjusted limits. For the 2022 election, that limit was $7,600. There are ways to get around that limit, Williams writes, but only under certain conditions, including that payments must not be made with the, quote, cooperation or consent of or in consultation with or at the request or suggestion of any candidate or any of his or her agents or authorized committees. Well, Brian Sells' complaint alleges that Frontline failed this test because a member of its board was also an agent of the governor. According to Sells, Brad Hughes, director of field services at Kemp's office since 2019, was also a member of the board of directors of Frontline Policy Action, Inc. since 2021. There are other allegations that have come to this organization before, and Williams cites those in his piece. Last November, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which designates Frontline as an anti-LGBTQ hate group, filed a complaint alleging that Frontline's president and founder, Cole Muzio, and attorney Chelsea Thompson, had been lobbying lawmakers under the Gold Dome without properly registering. According to that complaint, Muzio had not registered as a lobbyist since 2022, and Thompson had never registered. A February open records request with the Ethics Commission for all documents related to that complaint yielded only the complaints themselves. The commission confirmed Monday that there was nothing new to report since February. It's May. Thompson dismissed the complaint in a text message, writing, "This is a non-issue stemming from site technical issues. I've been in communication with the commission and have exercised due diligence throughout the process and expect the matter to be resolved soon." Thompson added that she is registered as a lobbyist, but Muzio is not because that is not part of his role, saying, "It would be inaccurate to say, y'all, we registered as lobbyists," she said. "I became the sole lead lobbyist for our organization following the 2024 legislative session." The complaint is from before then. Also, it would be false to suggest that we registered as lobbyists in response to the complaint. Our registration reflects a change in role and responsibility, not a reaction to any complaint. Ross Williams writing, Kemp's office declined to comment on the matter. Our office has not received or read the complaint, and it is not our practice to comment on complaints pending review or action, said Kemp spokesperson Garrison Douglas. During the session, it is common to see frontline activists speaking with lawmakers around the Capitol, Ross Williams writes. Muzio and Thompson stood behind Speaker John Burns as he unveiled the House's transgender sports ban bill and behind Ackworth Republican Senator Ed Setzler as he made his final pitch for his ultimately successful Religious Freedom Restoration Act bill. Thompson is often seen sitting alongside lawmakers in committee meetings as they present red meat conservative bills. The group's considerable influence and legislative successes have made them a major pain for Democrats, Williams writes. I don't think the general public has a real grasp of just how deeply embedded this Christian nationalist organization is in making policy for the state of Georgia. That's the statement from Representative Karen Lupton, a Chamblee Democrat. Everybody down here knows exactly who's with Frontline, who they're talking to, who they have in their pockets, and it's just kind of accepted as, well, this is the way we do business in Georgia. And that's not acceptable to me, she said. Lupton, who was raised as an evangelical Christian and planned to major in biblical studies, said she thinks Frontline uses its significant influence to launder hateful ideology. Adding, if people can see past the quote-unquote issue that's on the page, whatever issue they're bringing up, and look past it to where it's coming from, those anti-trans bills, those quote-unquote sports safety bills, did not come from athletic organizations. They did not come from athletes. They did not come from coaches. They came from the Christian nationalist far right, and people need to know that. The State Ethics Commission, they had a $300,000 fine for Stacey Abrams and her new Georgia Voter Project. What will they have for frontline policy action? That is a story yours truly will definitely keep an eye on in the coming weeks and months, or however long it takes for the State Ethics Commission to draw this one out. Okay. President Donald Trump and his mental fitness never seem to get questioned quite the way Joe Biden's has been during his 4-year presidency. But Alcatraz, seriously? Where did he come up with that? I think we have the answer next. All right, final few minutes in today's Ron Show. I think I got about 12 here. Admittedly, there's so much that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth or he pulls from his, well, you know. But you sometimes wonder, where did he get that idea? Or how did he come to that conclusion? And, well, the latest, because who knows by the time this airs, there'll probably be something. One of the latest cockamamie ideas that he's pulled out of nowhere is reopening Alcatraz. He's asked about that by a reporter.
How did you decide to reopen Alcatraz? Can you walk us through that decision?
Did I say what?
To reopen Alcatraz, how will you use it? How did you come up with the idea?
Well, I guess I was supposed to be a movie maker. We started with the movie making and we'll end. I mean, it represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. Our country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing and Alcatraz, the movies. But it's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there. Uh-huh. It housed the most violent criminals in the world, and nobody ever escaped. One person almost got there, but they, as you know the story, they found his clothing rather badly ripped up, and it was a lot of shark bites, a lot of problems. Nobody's ever escaped from Alcatraz, and just represented something strong having to do with law and order. We need law and order in this country. And so we're going to look at it. Some of the people up here are going to be working very hard on that. And we had a little conversation. I think it's going to be very interesting. We'll see if we can bring it back in large form, add a lot. But I think it represents something. Right now it's a big hulk that's sitting there rusting and rotting. You look at it, it's sort of, you saw that picture that was put out. It's sort of amazing. But it sort of represents something that's both horrible and beautiful and strong and miserable, weak. It's got a lot of qualities that are interesting, and I think they make a point.
But wait, not to be out-stupided. Is that a word? Should I use that word when I'm saying out-stupided? Judge Jeanine.
Let me tell you something. When I was a judge, I used to send prisoners to Sing Sing. if I could have sent them to Alcatraz, it would have been great because I came across some that absolutely deserved to be there. Donald Trump made it very clear it wasn't just for illegals. He talked about domestic terrorists, cartel bosses, serial killers, Americans. Let me tell you, I think the island location, the cold water, the shark-infested water, the isolation it represents, the fact that this is something that you don't want to go to as a defendant, you don't want to be sentenced there. I know it's going to cost money. I know, but it's a maximum security location. You're not going to get visits by your family. They're not going to fly out there, get on a boat, and go to Alcatraz. This is the worst thing you can do for a criminal defendant in the United States in terms of sentencing. And I think it's great. I think we need a supermax like this. We don't have anything like El Salvador. And if the goal is to house the worst of the worst, he's got it. Now, we've got jail overcrowding in California. All right. We need more room. So that's one of the reasons, the historical continuity of this thing and the surveillance technology that we can now utilize with drone surveillance and tunneling that we've got down because of what's going on in Gaza. We figured that out. I think that this is a symbolic deterrent and it's legendary. And in the end, I think that when it's only reachable by boat and helicopter, they're going to understand. There's no conjugal visits here, boys. Your girlfriend ain't showing up.
White House spokesperson Stephen Miller on Lara Ingraham.
There are people in this country, as President Trump has said, who will do nothing with their lives but rape, maim, and murder. They cannot be rehabilitated. They cannot be saved. They cannot be coached in some better way of living. They are always going to hurt. They are always going to steal. They are always going to attack. And we need a place in this country where we can send people to visually demonstrate their total separation from society. The fact that they're not going to live among us and will never live among us. Additionally, this helps to disrupt transnational criminal organizations because it is harder to communicate with. It is harder to apply pressure to individuals who are inside of that prison because of its separation, again, from society. So it's right for our security. It's right for our safety.
White House spokesperson Karen Levitt on Sean Hannity, also on Fox News.
Great to see you, Sean. Thank you so much. And this is a phenomenal idea by President Trump that will be executed upon. In fact, I can confirm for you that the White House has already administered calls with the Bureau of Prisons, our counterparts at the Department of Justice, and our counterparts at the Department of Interior, because Alcatraz is now run by the National Park Service, and we know our great Secretary of Interior, Doug Burgum, is in charge of that. So the Bureau of Prisons has already confirmed that they are assessing next steps to reopen this notorious prison. And the reason for it is because President Trump is leaving no stone unturned to restore law and order to our country and to make it very clear to criminals, repeat offenders, not just illegal immigrant criminals, but also American citizens who have refused to comply with our nation's laws. If you have been repeatedly breaking the law, if you are in and out of prison, that is ending under this administration. President Trump's team is going to enforce our laws and prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. So we are absolutely looking into this, assessing next steps, and it's a part of the president's big picture law and order agenda, which is obviously working, especially when you look at the illegal border crossings at our southern border. The border is secure, mass deportations are underway, and law and order is back in America thanks to President Trump.
Okay, the law and order thing is always funny to those of us who realize and recall that Donald Trump is a convicted felon occupying the White House. Also, how about this? Anybody see the story about the fired DOJ attorney who says she went to TikTok? I saw it on Instagram as well. That Donald Trump's pardons have cost taxpayers $1 billion. Her name is Liz Oyer, and she says that Americans lost out on restitution because President Donald Trump sidestepped the usual clemency process to pardon some of his allies. That story came out of the Washington Post on May 1st. Perry Stein, Beth Reinhart reporting. Their reporting continuing. Liz Oyer, the Justice Department's recently fired pardon attorney, made a staggering claim on social media this week. President Donald Trump's pardons of people convicted of white-collar crimes have cost Americans $1 billion. She arrived at the number by adding up all the money that people who were pardoned allegedly owed in restitution based on how much they were convicted of stealing. Some pardon recipients had not been sentenced, which means that a judge had not yet ruled on prosecutors' calculations of what they owed back to their victims. At least one pardon recipient had already started paying restitution and could attempt to get that money back. Okay, so the question is, where did President Donald Trump get this preposterous idea of reopening Alcatraz? Now, I'm doing the math, 60 years after it was closed.
It's lucky timing for me. So, 3 times more expensive than any prison to operate in 1959, Alcatraz was. Okay? It needs about $250 million to shore up the infrastructure and utilities. All food and water has to be barged in. Sewage has to be barged out. The facility is almost 100 years old. And so I don't get it. In the days of DOGE, where we're cutting budgets, we got to find savings. Now we're going to what? We're going to cut Medicaid and SNAP so that we can pour money into Alcatraz. First of all, have you been to Alcatraz recently? It literally it's a rust box walking around. You need a tetanus shot just to go into the building. Do we still give tetanus shots, or has RFK gotten rid of those? I can't keep up. And so, listen, where did the president get this idea?
That's a question.
All of a sudden, right? Where did he get the idea? Perhaps he was watching Escape from Alcatraz, right? And I brought boards because some people are visual learners. Perhaps he was watching Escape from Alcatraz by Clint Eastwood. Actually, funny part about that, it was actually on television in South Florida. It was on PBS South Florida over the weekend when Trump was at Mar-a-Lago. In fact, he made his announcement just hours after it aired.
Wow.
You know PBS, the programming that he's trying to get rid of, so just in case you're keeping up, right? It's 2 dolls for girls and 0 Elmos, okay? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe he was watching The Rock with Sean Connery. You know this one. This is where Sean Connery goes back to Alcatraz because he originally escaped Alcatraz and he needed like an expert on chemical weapons. Maybe the president was just Netflixing and chilling, like watching The Rock, which is not to be confused with The Rock, right? That's a different person. And then the president's really excited about these sharks, right? He's talking about all the sharks and the person escaped. He lost his clothing. So, you know, sharks, they don't have laser beams on. They don't have laser beams, but maybe the sharks are going to be there. So this is just all ridiculous. But then all of a sudden after that, we heard like, oh, we're going to tariff the movies. Well, hold on a second. Why would we tariff the movies? This is where the president is getting his ideas from. We can't tariff the policy idea making of the presidency. And look, I know what my colleagues are going to say. They're going to say, Jared, just let the president cook. This is 4D chess he's playing. And I'm going to say, maybe he's just watching late night movies. Perhaps he's just watching late night movies. In fact, we're told he got this movie tariff idea from no other than Jon Voight. You know, the guy who was in that great movie Anaconda. I don't know if you've seen that. And so this is the ridiculousness that's going on. So I want to end with this. Mr. Pearl, you run a faith-based organization, right? No? Oh, it's Mr. Wild, you run the faith-based organization. Sorry. You think it's a good idea to reopen Alcatraz? You think the faith-based community has been pounding the table to reopen Alcatraz?
Prison Fellowship's stance is that prisons should be safe, effective, efficient, and uphold human dignity.
Okay, let me make it easier for you. All 4 of you, which one of you think we should reopen Alcatraz? Just raise your hand. Okay, so
no one.
For my colleagues who sometimes, are a little slow, no one raised their hand. Okay, nobody, not a single witness. None of your witnesses here think we should reopen Alcatraz. And so, we have real problems in the prison system. It does need reform. It does need money. We can work on that together. But the president puts out Alcatraz as a distraction.
Yeah, and seemed to have gotten it from staying up late night to watch Escape from Alcatraz on PBS. Well, that'll do it. You know what? We'll talk about Hollywood's influence on politics. Actually, my guest on Thursday's show, actor, political activist, somewhat at least on social media. He's got quite a following. His name is Ethan Embry. You know Ethan Embry, right? It turns out he and wife Sonny Mabry live in Metro Atlanta. We're going to catch up and have lots of conversating. Anyway, that'll do it for today's Ron Show. My thanks to Senator Josh McLaurin for joining us, launching his lieutenant governor's campaign in full earnest. We'll have all the show notes at ronshowatl.com. This show airs 9 a.m., 5 p.m. weekdays on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Take care.